Hi friends, welcome to TechieMit. In continuation of the whiteboard recording videos, today we'll bring the new topic, that is MVC Framework in Java. So what is basically an MVC framework? MVC framework. So MVC is basically an acronym which is used for Model View Controller Framework. So Model View Controller Framework, as I told you, M stands for model, V stands for view component, C is the controller component. In the MVC framework, so we do have, that is model, second is the view, third is the controller component in the MVC framework. So basically the need arises, so because if you try to combine all the logic in a single Java class, then it will lead to a lot of cumbersome code and a lot of difficult logic to handle. So the need of MVC framework arises due to the separation of concern. So model is basically that deals with data part of the request. Here is something that is useful to display UI to the end user. And controller is basically, it acts as an interface between model and view. Or you also can call it as a bridge. Between the model and view part. So let's see a real world example related to this, so it would be easy to understand. So in our case study, the real world example is, suppose there is a shopping website and you are visiting the shopping website. So your browser or your computer becomes a client, and so to display any, so in the there is a catalog and it displays a list of values. So to display the list of values, you need to interact with the database. So I will just show a diagram in how the header flow can go about it. So you are the user that initiates the process to the client. This is your own computer, you can consider. So you are basically a client. Okay, and here exists a, suppose I consider this as a DB, database part. So you just place your request, client request, so you call it as, and here's now the actually MVC comes into the picture. So consider this as controller. This as a model, and this as a view component. Okay, so these are basically the three components: model, view, and controller. So first, what will you how the process goes. So suppose you place a web page request from your browser or say the client. So to reach to the our main application, how does it reach? So first the controller receives it. Okay. So the controller is basically, as I told, it's act as a interface. It can be a dispatcher servlet, or a normal servlet, whose responsibility is basically just to delegate the request to the appropriate controller on the basis of incoming request that is received. So the controller receives the request, and so there is some business logic, because as I said, we have to display the catalog of products available in the shopping market. So for that, to store the data, that here comes the part of model. So model basically stores the data. Basically they are POJO classes. So POJO class being plain old Java object classes. So as the client receives the request, the controller what it does now, not that is important. Controller basically it delegates the request to the appropriate controller, and as for the data part, it interacts with the model, and this is both bidirectional interaction. Means it sends basically the request to for the data that it needs, and model also it receives the request and responds to the controller with the data object or some value that specifically the controller might be needing to serve the client. And after that is controller is received the updated model, what it does, it gives the same value to the view. So firstly the controller receives the request, it for the data part it processes the request to the model sends its response in data form to the controller. So controller is now having the updated model object with itself. Now we need to view the updated model. So controller will send the response to the, this is the request, again this is the response. Okay, and this is again, sorry, this is a response from model to controller. This is again request. So request from controller to model gives the data in form of response, and the updated model object is sent to the view, that is the UI part, that is responsible for handling the what the end user can see. End user viewing, it can be a web page, let us consider it as web page, and once it receives the updated view, so it sends it back to the client over here. Directly the updated view is sent back to the client, and now yeah, of course, one part is there, when it comes to the model it interacts with the database. So to receive the data that's stored in the database, the model interacts with the database. The database also send the response. Sorry, this is the request. This is a request from model to DB, and the database sends a response. Usually, request can be sent in the form of queries when when the model might query into the database what exactly it needs, be it a collection of records or some documents. So it will send that request to the database. Database will send to the response, the model, and now after receiving the updated model, the response is sent back to the controller. The controller sees the updated model to the view, and from the view it goes back to the client. So this is about MVC framework or model view controller framework. So the start process started from client, is the request or browser, and followed by that in our main paradigm we have controller, model, and view, and each have its own specification. Controller being responsible to handle access and interface to delegate the request between model and view, and model is something that is responsible for holding the data and sending the data responses to the controller, and view is something that in the form of UI browser or some web page that the end user might be requesting, and the response is then sent from the view to the client, which is our end user. So, and after it receives the response, the particular web page which the user might be requested can be seen on the screen on the browser. So this video was all about how does MVC framework really works, and what are basically the main paradigms in MVC framework. We saw about model, view, and controller. So more videos to come on #TechieMit related to design principles. Do keep liking, subscribing #TechieMit. Bye for now.